Welcome back to the Two Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and before we jump into today's episode, as you see in the title, and as the thumbnail is going to show you as well, 2023-2024 NBA season recap. We'll call it the good, bad, the ugly. This actually was an article I've done in the past. Last year, obviously, featured a lot of interesting things like John Morant and Jordan Poole and Draymond Green, and I talked about the playoff parity specifically, which obviously I think will potentially be a recurring theme today. Grayson and I didn't really compare notes a super hard bit, but we've got some great things to talk about today. I think podcast forum is probably going to be more interesting, and that's what we're going to do here today. Before we reintroduce Grayson for the 100th time having on, we greatly appreciate his support there. Don't forget that Two Pointers is sponsored by SeatGeek, $20 off your first purchase. I mentioned the tickets I got for my in-laws. We just officially got those lined up, so November 9th, Purdue, Ohio State. I'll be in the shoe if anybody is going to be down there for that game or in and around Columbus listening to that. I know we have some audience there, so that'd be really cool. We'll be in Columbus for that weekend. Shout out to SeatGeek for hooking that up. $20 off your first purchase, code 2-pointers. Link in the top of the description, whether that's football games in the fall, whether that's baseball, concerts, sporting events, whatever you're going to be going to. Use SeatGeek. Don't break into the stadium like Copa America did. Like, don't do that. Just do the right thing and buy the ticket, $20 off, even with all the fees. SeatGeek does help you guys out with that, $20 off your first purchase. So, all right, now that the monologue or the open is kind of, there, I want to lead into it with this. I mentioned what this was, what the former iteration was. This is what I want to be a reflective recap. So the way I look at this, the way I think of this is we always talk about All-NBA, All-Star, these common accolades that come up on Basketball Reference and ultimately Hall of Fame pages is that's the way we remembered that season. So obviously that's why I don't take lightly to Shea not getting, a second defensive team or whatever it ended up being, or defensive player votes. However, that ended up landing that we talked about this year earlier. Because I think that is going to kind of take away from his season, right? So as like a thing that we maybe want to talk about that one day down the road will matter even more, right? So this is more of a reflection of, it has less to do with really the accolades of a season. Some of this stuff will be related to a guy's, accolades or how they kind of finished the season. But I wanted to get as far away from all NBA teams and just things that were going to be like Jaylen Brown, winning Finals MVP, winning Eastern Conference Finals MVP, or whatever the heck that stupid award is, and then him at least being a top 15 player is something we'll remember, right? That was a memorable season. They won it, right? Everyone gets the point there. This is designed to kind of take us outside of those four walls. How are we going to remember this NBA season? Example, if we did this in 2020, we would remember Rudy Gobert rubbing his hands all over the microphones. That would be the biggest slap, ugly, bad, whatever. How you determine bad and ugly is going to be up to you guys in the comments. Let us know what we forget. And I think I really touched on everything there. Good, bad, ugly. We're going to start with the good, of course, the bad, and then the ugly. We'll go in from there. Before we jump into that, I've talked long enough. Welcome back, my friend. Introduce yourself.
I don't know how many times. I can't count that high. It's been a lot. It's always a pleasure to be on. You heard my voice last recapping all 5 of the NBA Finals games for the second year in a row, so enjoyed a good bit of that. Just been keeping an eye on the offseason while also trying to, keep in mind what we saw this past season. I was looking forward to Trevor's article this year about the topics, so when he reached out to me to add to his podcast format for this year, I was delighted to do so. Took some notes. We have a couple of things that are similar, but I think that'll help just build off each other's points. And I'm sure we'll have some things different from each other just to make sure we cover as many bases. But like he said, if we miss things for your team, for a team, for a player, definitely let us know, because I think it's going to be a good way to look back on this season in a couple of years. We can come back to this video, come back to the comments, and really remember the things we're supposed to.
So, yeah, look, I would love to do more than 5 finals games. We've talked about that. So this is maybe an extension of a 6th finals game. Boston obviously had an incredible year. Let's jump right into it. These are in no particular order. I want people to understand that. Was Victor, I guess I'll ask it as a question to kind of lead into it, because I think we both agree. Ultimately, I think Victor Wembanyama, he was as good or better than expected, correct?
Oh, at a minimum, as good. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, couple of things that just kind of lead into that, and then just we kind of put a bow on his rookie year at that point, really is how I thought about this. He led the league in blocks per game at 3.6, again, as a rookie. Won Rookie of the Year. I and many others voted for him for Defensive Player of the Year. So that alone should warrant something of what we need to remember that. Like,
Finished
he
second,
didn't win
yeah.
it. yeah, we're going to look at the list, right? We're going to say, like, okay, finish second, but ultimately, unless you're doing some Bill Simmons podcast in 10 years, we're talking about the second place voting. Not many places really do that. Not many places really care about that. So it's just, the point is, him being second in Defensive Player of the Year is probably going to get forgotten about, even of his stature. And then he was first in total blocks in a season, which I think will translate well for, you think about guys like Hakeem, Moses. I'm obviously leaving off playing David Robinson. Those guys finished less blocks per game sometime of those years, but the perennial every year block guys were the ones that stayed on the floor longer and did it well. And obviously he had that kind of season. He led the league, 254. Do you know the next closest to him in blocks total this year?
Next closest in blocks.
The total blocks. Yep.
Total blocks. Okay. That's a little bit. I think longevity a little bit. Rudy, maybe? Would that be something that he was close enough, maybe?
Longevity was the right way to think about it. I think the guy in second played 82 games. He had
it was like Chet?
90. Yeah, Chet had the 190. So
man.
What we think of it, and there's nothing wrong with Chet being like this guy that's going to end up getting forgotten about because of Victor, the guy who had number one in that class, the guy who I think a lot of people had in the top two, probably really consensusly. Yeah. And I don't want to cloud him in any way. That's not the point. But like that just shows you how, if Victor didn't exist in the chasm that we think of him as, Chet's the guy that we continue to talk about every year like that. And so anyway, my point is Victor is as good or better than expected. I know we both had that written down. So any Victor thoughts from the year?
It's really the most likely thing we remember this year for. It's the first year of Victor Wembanyama. If his trajectory continues in the direction it trended towards even throughout this first season, a little bit of training wheels, it wasn't a full go from the very start, which is a smart way to look at it because the Spurs team wasn't accomplishing anything in totality anyway. They matched their 22 win total from last year this year. And they were tanking, but then also were one of the most impactful teams in the playoffs just because of what they did to Denver in game 82 and shuffled around the top seeds in the West. So you could look at it like that. And that the game also showed me they were more than capable of hanging with teams like Denver. Just the direction of the franchise would benefit more from them not doing that, at least not winning games, which is frustrating, is unfortunate. But I think it's something that won't continue for much, much longer just because Wembanyama is that good. They made decent moves in the offseason to give him, non-scrubs on the court alongside him, which is nice. He's got a Hall of Fame point guard now in Chris Paul. That was a major lacking thing I think he'll benefit from. I mean, we saw the benefits that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander reaped from just a year with Chris Paul. So if it is only a year in San Antonio, I think Victor and Stephon Castle, the top draft pick from the franchise, will get a lot of benefits from that, and we'll see them continue throughout their careers. So yeah, year one of we all think 2025. I don't know about that, but I think that the best is certainly out in front of Wembanyama. It's going to be exciting to see him keep ticking upwards.
Yeah, look, talking to Spurs fans, it can't get any better. I mean, like, I had a Spurs friend that texted me who lives relatively close to the stadium where he can go to games and cover the team. And his words were, man, you got to get out here for a game before we build that downtown stadium, which is supposedly coming, building a downtown stadium, and the ticket prices skyrocket. That was his point. I said, buddy, the tickets skyrocketed on April 18th of 2023. Like, they went up last year the moment the lottery ball fell the way it did. I'm like, that is not in any way, shout out to Evan Townsend, but that is not in any way a vindication of, okay, well, it's this new stadium, it's this new Clipper. Like, we always talk about the Clippers. We have to think of things like, I get he's not like better than LeBron, and he may never be, but like the way we thought about LeBron, I wasn't super old for that, and people, you have to take people's word for that a little bit. But like, we think of them as this, like, he's almost this unicorn in the way we think about players and the way we think about their kind of progression and the way he is specifically. So he's almost like I'm fumbling through my words a little bit, but it's also kind of warranted because we don't really know what to expect from him. He could be he could be a top 10 player next year, and I don't think anybody would be surprised. I just don't. Obviously, the list is really interesting. Like we went through the Jaylen Brown example, top 15. Jaylen Brown ended up being somewhere in the 10 to 15 range. Can he be better than Jaylen Brown next year? That's, I think, a bit of a stretch, and I think people kind of be hyperbole with that stuff. But, I mean, he's closer to 10 than he is 50.
Oh, yeah.
As a
Absolutely.
rookie? Like, hello?
Right. Yeah.
it's just one of those things you just kind of have to just put your hands up and be like, you know what, I'm just going to enjoy the fact that it's happening. And I think I made that point with
Exactly.
him and Chet were going at it with the Defensive Player of the Year when it felt close, and I was like, can we just like enjoy the fact that both are kind of in this? And it was kind of weird, and that changed very quickly. All right, what do you got? I know we have a few other similar ones or same ones. So anything that you have that I know we talked about it a little bit, but is there anything that you have that we may not have together already? Or give me your next one.
My next one is one that was my favorite point you made in the article last year was the parity. We are long removed from the Steph versus LeBron era, wherever LeBron ended up. Even it was LeBron versus the Spurs before that. I think we've had 6 consecutive, non-consecutive champions, and I think that's going to continue. I mean, we had a 5 seed in the Mavericks in the finals and a 6 seed in the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals. So, gone are the years of it's kind of like the NCAA tournament. You just kind of pick chalk and pray, and a lot of times you're right. There's a little bit of madness now. I mean, it takes obviously Giannis, best player on the court, and a series goes down, that changes things. But the Pacers went into MSG and won a Game 7, so it was no fluke, and they showed that. So a lot of credit to them. And I mean, even in the East, we said the West was wide open all year. In the East was the Celtics, but the Celtics had played down to teams and made it wide open for years, fresh off a loss to Miami last season. And so I think it was almost a little surprising that Boston cruised, didn't play a Game 6 the entirety of the playoffs. It's a big credit to them. We've spoken at length about how good that team was. But, going to the playoffs, we're like, it's Boston. You never know. They won, 70 games or whatever it was, but you don't know. And so the playoffs, I don't think this is some all-time playoff slate we had, but as far as, what was set in stone and what wasn't, I think it was a good year for the unknown. We certainly saw that. We saw Denver and the Thunder bounced in round 2 in the West, the 1 seed and the defending champ both gone. And so it was the Timberwolves and the Mavericks playing for a spot in the finals. And everybody thought it was going to be Minnesota in that series, and it wasn't. So I think a lot of teams are bunched up tightly together. I think that the West has 4 or 5 teams that are going to be pretty close to what we had this past season, where 3 teams were within, a few games, even headed into the home stretch. Game 82 mattered for all those teams. And in the East, I think the Chase group, led by probably Philly and the Knicks at this point, trying to catch up to Boston, is a force to be reckoned with. We'll see what Milwaukee does. But I think even peeking into next year in mid-July, I don't think parity is going anywhere in the league, and I'm excited to see how it unfolds.
We almost feel like we're at an inflection point, and I only bring that up because I didn't put parity down this year because I feel like last year's playoff parity felt more extreme, if that makes any sense. Like, I know Dallas in the final. Yeah, and that's kind of, it is what it is. Yeah. And Denver was the 1 seed. Right. But I think the way I would try to think about it is that all of this to say that, like, the West is loaded, the East has teams that, like there's Boston, like you just kind of laid out the case for like how we felt about them, but there's Boston, and then there's like significant gap in teams that I think are ready to take the next step. Maybe New York, but like Indiana's not doing it next year. Miami sure as heck not doing it. Philly is like probably second right now in the East, and I have my doubts and my questions. The point is like the West is loaded, so I felt there was a small imbalance. That just shows you how wild the year over year is, because last year my whole point was parity. Like, okay, this is like crazy. Everybody's really good again. And the playoffs, I think, kind of dampened some of that for me. Like, I know you said parity as a whole and you laid out the Western Conference case, which I think is the correct way to think about it. All of that to say, though, like, we're at this weird impasse where the league is super talented, and yet East-West, like, the West has always been better conference. Like, it's just been this story forever. All of this before even expansion has to happen soon, too. And so we think the parity is insane now. I mean, I know you're taking the bottom, like what I think we keep 8, keep 9, or whatever it is, and then the teams can pluck a draft there, and then they get a high draft pick, whatever. They have a slow rebuild for the most part. Like your Hornets of the old, I think the 88 Hornets were like the only real team to ever kind of just kick out the gate running and be really good.
Right.
I think that parity can even be more diversified within a year or two. Whenever the NBA says, like, hey, it's time to expand, it's probably 28 by the time they do that, giving the full second apron time to kick in and stuff. Don't get me wrong. But something about I think my long-winded point to try to land the plane is the playoffs dampen some of that parity for me. That's the only reason I bring it up. It's just
Yeah,
because
no, I agree with that.
Boston, it has nothing to do with Boston being that good. It just has everything to do with, I feel like no matter who slugged it out in the West, quote unquote, whether that was Denver, like I still would have picked Boston probably. As stupid as that might sound, like
Yeah,
it just felt like once you have a team that is doing what Golden State did in the last couple of years, doing what Cleveland did, doing what San Antonio did, doing what Miami did, like you mentioned, all these kind of sections of these eras. Once teams start doing that, it dampens it a little bit. But those are some of the most fun times of the NBA for memory's sake for me, but also just for the way we think about the league and think about legacies. So the last 15 years is important. The last 5 has been really, really interesting, which is how you really led the point. So I think it's all fair in the fact that it's 100% a good thing. There's nothing wrong with the parity in the league. I just think the playoffs, something about them, and I'm not the only one to talk about this, but something about them dampened it a little bit. And I wonder if we see another like crazy shakeup year, or maybe we see 2 best teams. Maybe it's Boston and Denver again. We all think it's this collision course, and then ultimately maybe it's a team in the East that knocks Boston off. Maybe it's Philly's year. There's just there's enough behind the top teams in both conferences that I think it'll get weird fast. Philly, New York, if they both stay healthy, I think can be really, really interesting this year. So didn't really talk about free agency or even the Mikal Bridges trade. That wasn't something that I had a chance to do on a pod yet. So, but it's just part of this thought and part of this story. So, all right. The Jalen Brunson story arc. That was kind of a nice segue on purpose. Mikal Bridges. The idea of where we are now that the Knicks are putting themselves in quote unquote like contender, putting themselves as contenders. I don't even know how else to word that. Going from a decent second option, and I'm talking like Jalen Brunson had like the most shots of his career. I laid out the case. I've already done the thing about Jalen Brunson. People can go listen to that. But to go from like second option, still took a lot of shots, was super inefficient, but we saw it. We knew it was there. Mark Cuban was going to underpay him anyway. That was the thing that was so confusing in this whole chasm of the way we think about him. To even like it, I'm not saying he wasn't a second level or second best player. He felt almost like a high level role player that kind of eventually turned into that. I mean, where he was drafted and the way we look at those college guys, that's really what that's really what we thought he was going to be forever. We thought he was going to be Dante DiVincenzo forever. Like, it just is what it is. To do that and now be an all NBA player, a top 10 player in the league, and an MVP candidate in 18 months, it's probably the best thing on this list. I just don't know. Like, he's an incredible story, and none of it still makes sense to me.
No, I mean, it's shades of James Harden for sure, but Harden had the draft pedigree, the hype. We could all see it coming with the change of scenery, increased role, added usage, all those things. And no one was really stunned when, Houston became the city of James Harden. But for Jalen Brunson to go from the guy who, interesting, he had 40 in a playoff game. Okay. Still Luka's city, still Luka's team, etc. And you let him go, and you're like, well, that's not a void that's going to be too difficult to fill. And then you watch the Knicks this year, and you're like, yeah, I don't think you would recognize the player if you watched the tape 18 months apart. I really don't. He just grew with the team. And I think the team is, he's the catalyst to what they were able to do with Julius Randle being MIA, injured, whatever, for the entire season. People forget he exists. They're going to have to figure that out. The only non-Nova piece, I guess. But no, I think it's incredible. It's a great story. It's Linsanity on steroids because the guy was the best player on the team. And it carried through for an entire season. So I think it was a wonderful story. And if we're talking, give me 3 bullet points for this season, I think him and Wembanyama occupy 2 of them. I don't think there's a lot of argument against it. I think the argument starts at 3 if you're trying to rank, most likely to be remembered for this season. It's like this is the start of Wembanyama and the start of superstar form for Brunson. So I think it's very sustainable. The ankles thing scares me a little bit, but that's just how hard he was playing night in, night out, which is a trait you have to have. You're going to play for Tibbs, or he'll just sit you on the bench every night. We saw that with the 6-7 man rotations and all the things that happened in the playoffs. But I think that this is as optimistic as the Knicks have been, post Carmelo. I think by far. I think there's sustainability to it. It's repeatable. did they get miles better this offseason? No, but I think they did things that could set them up to improve. And I think that Brunson, if he takes another quarter step, I think this team is firmly in the 2 slot in the East. And, when you match teams up for 2 weeks, you got to win 4 out of 7. If anybody's going to mentally win against Boston, it's a team like the Knicks. So it was great to watch. I found myself looking over there where on League Pass most nights just to see what he was going to do in crunch time or even not in crunch time, salting games away, whatever it may be. So I think he absolutely qualifies in the good part of this.
Yeah, there are people that do the League Pass rankings out there that do it better than anybody else, and I try not to, take any of that market share. But without a shadow of a doubt, my eye was always on those Knicks games in the third or fourth quarter. It just was. It just was the way it was. I was going to interject with a pun when you said they weren't miles better, and I was going to ask you if they were Mikal better, but I was going to leave it alone. This is a guy that went from 21.8 minutes per game as a rookie, 17.9 the year after. Obviously played 57 games that year, so a little bit more of a, he started 36 of them, but went through a couple of injury spells there. 25 minutes a game and then 31, and then skyrocketed from 3. I mean, that was kind of the thing that really changed his game, was he really was always a good 3-point shooter. He was reliable at Villanova, but that's not what we knew him for. We knew him as this National Player of the Year. We knew him as this leader, this, championship pedigree point guard, this typical prototypical college guy, like this Frank Mason, if you would.
Right.
He was kind of the guy to do it at Kansas, right? So it's all right, I know they didn't win a national championship, but my point being is a guy that got better, but we always felt like there was a cap on his career. We always kind of put this ceiling on these guys that was probably, a little shorter than we probably think, no pun intended. And turns into, I'm just going to read the accolades. I mentioned them a little bit earlier. MVP 5th, All-NBA second team, All-Star game, Most Improved Player 5th, and Clutch Player of the Year 5th. Whatever, like the stupid award. But he was always somebody that was present or relevant in conversation amongst people that weren't fans of the New York Knicks. And so what that is up to people to interpret, but he was a big, big part of what we thought about those Knicks teams. And I mean, look, I'm not saying barring any health they beat Boston. I'm just not. But they got better. I'm agree with you. I don't think they got miles better. But this year, to kind of tie back to the story of this year, the good, his season is what propelled them to say, yeah, we're fine with giving up 4 picks for Mikal, even though it felt like an overpay. That's just what it is now for Mikal. But I think he's an incredible complementary player, regardless of the Villanova connection. So it should be really interesting. And he's obviously, he's the real deal. And I even though I always want to tell you that there's doubts with these small guys, quickly being figured out, quickly going through injury spells, quickly going through things where teams maybe figure them out enough, but then they kind of change their game a little bit. And typically that's the 3-point player or 3-point play that comes into effect. And he's already has that. So I just wonder how much that's going to be. 21 shots a game, that's a lot of shots for a guy that could not be potentially durable long-term. I'm just a little worried, but doesn't take anything away from this year anyway. All right. What else do you have? I have one more thing, and then we got to start getting to the bad, unfortunately.
I think as we enter the twilight years of the generation that raised us as NBA fans, being Steph, LeBron, etc., those guys are starting to exit the league. And I think the tier up next, if you will, I don't have an age minimum or maximum here. It's just the guys that will be in the league for the next 5 years at a minimum. So, your Shea, Luka, Ant, Tatum, regardless of where you think he falls. Wembanyama is already playing himself onto that list. Brunson, if he can do this again, is going to be on that list. So I think it's good to see that there's no void as far as who the icons are going to be in major markets, things like that. As guys like Durant, LeBron, Steph, I'm leaving out a dozen probably, but guys
look at the
exit the league. Yeah. Right, yeah. Father Time wins. And no, Anthony Edwards is not the best player on that team right now, but he thinks he is, and in 4 years, he probably will be. There's a pretty good chance that if you look back in 4 years, or as we enter 28.
Closer to 1 than 12. I hate to keep using that analogy, but it's
he is. True. Yeah, he is. Absolutely. And so I'm excited again. for the future, but also the present, because we're watching them develop into the guys that are going to be the faces of the league. And that's something that was dominated by one guy, primarily in LeBron this past generation. But I think there's plenty of, time, if you will, for that to be spread around to several players. And I think it's going to depend on the night, the season, the playoff run, who can rack up wins. Can Giannis get back and get another one and put himself back on this list of can't miss guys? Jokic, I don't know how long he wants to play. He's going to play as long as he wants to play, and only he knows that. So,
Very Andrew Luckish. I know there was
right. He's going to be the best player in the world as long as he feels like it, which, again, is his own right. He can go do horse racing in Serbia whenever he wants. As an NBA fan, I hope it's not in 2 years from now, because, I get the part of making your money, getting your titles, your accolades, and not having your body break down on you. But at the same time, selfishly, I would love for everybody to have a 20-year NBA career like LeBron and play at that level that he does. So, a little bit of a question mark there, not because of him as a player, but because of how long he's going to give us the privilege of watching him perform at that level. Because I think he can truly decide for himself how long he stays at the top of the league, which is an insane sentence to say out loud when it's not about LeBron James. But he's been that good for long enough to where I think he gets the benefit of the doubt. So, as far as who's up next, again, I didn't go through ages. It's just we know who the guys are. We know who the guys are that are exiting the league. And so, that half dozen, 10, wherever you want to draw that line in the sand, I think we're in for a treat the next 5-10 years of the league.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. That's why I didn't push back super hard on the parity, because it's just 1 year, and ultimately these guys will dictate the parity of the league. To your point about Jokic, something to think about. Again, only he knows this. He was part of that age group, or that group of guys. I know he was a second-round pick, so his cap hit's always going to be smaller, even with the contract extensions, supermax eligibilities, whatever, right? 5-year, 276, 47, 51. This is the cap hit annually. 47, 51, 55, 59, and then 62 player option. I'm going to go with the Ryan Russillo's theme here. Probably going to pick that one up. 32 years old. That's in 27-28, which would put him at 28-29 the year at 33 years old, unrestricted free agent. That's kind of the year where guys decide, all right, this is the last real. In the past, that was your last real contract. That was like your last true max. Was this one he's on now? Most guys, I would say most guys are going to get to 33, that Paul George age that he was at the beginning of the contract he just finished up. That was the Paul George age, where or close to the Paul George age, right? The whole point was they were scared to give him that final year so that he would be 40, making like $60 million or whatever it was, right? So where he ends up is, I'm not shocked with either result. Again, only he knows this answer. He retires at 33 as an unrestricted free agent, making at that point, just off this contract alone, $276 million. So ultimately, let's just round up to $400 million. That's what he made. I'm just making a wild guess there, but I'm sure it's closer to 5 than we think. And I also wouldn't be shocked if he said at that point he's going to be such a small cap hit because of the increase in the salaries and the way they clearly think they're going to head with the apron, the way they've already done with this team, where it's basically him and Murray and they'll figure out the pieces, obviously getting rid of KCP. My point being is he could also sign that contract and that be the last one. So he signed one more. That would be what history tells us to do. Again, not shocked if he Andrew Luck it and says, I'm gone. See you later. And, exactly. He's a guy that gets beat up on the court, and it very similarly reminds me of Andrew Luck. And obviously, like you said, very selfishly, I would be very sad. So, all right, last thing. The NBA season, in-season tournament. If there was a fine or an okay category, it would probably fit there better. But it wasn't bad or ugly, so I think it should be mentioned. And it's so far away from how we viewed the league as a 12-month cycle now, where I think it was good. I really do. I don't think it was bad. I don't think it was ugly. It's on the lower end of good, which is why I'm mentioning it at the 28-minute mark before the 30-minute little, ready to go to the next segment thing. So ultimately, where did you land with the in-season tournament, knowing that this opinion is now 7 months old?
It's either just barely into bad, just from a who cares standpoint. I don't know what they spent on marketing. They should ask for a refund. I mean, off the top of your head, do you know who your Lakers beat in the championship game of this thing?
Well, yeah, the Pacers, right? Because it was this big coming out moment for them, right? But that's the thing. If it was the Lakers and the Celtics, was this a bigger deal? Probably not.
Maybe. For those two fan bases, yeah, it would take two
paying,
teams
though.
like that.
You mentioned like what the league paid for it. Like, you mean what they got paid? It's now the Emirates NBA Cup. Emirates is like $1 trillion company. So
I forgot
I
about
mean,
that.
at
Yeah.
this point, that's why I'm like, for now, as we knew it before the Emirates part, I think it was pretty good. I don't see why it wasn't. I don't know.
It was all
I'm
right.
with you though. The Pacers point is incredible because I brought up the Celtics thing thinking you'd be like, well, no one's going to care more. And then you said maybe, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm wrong about this because I don't know.
It would take two large fan bases of that magnitude to make it a true event. I think if you're trying to beat the Pacers to 150 on a Wednesday night, no one's really going to tune in to watch that. I get what they're trying to do. They're, injecting cash into the early parts of the season where no one really cares. The players barely care. People like James Harden aren't even in shape yet. It's a bit of a lull because you're getting into one, you're butting against football. That's never a fun spot to be TV ratings wise. And two, I still land on gimmick if I pick a word out of the air, but I think, for the first run of it before they get the sponsors that we can all just chuckle at because we know what that is. There's room for improvement. I believe in the future of it. I wasn't really enthralled with, version 1.0, but I think Adam Silver and his, I guess you'd call it rapport he's built up with the fan base of fixing things and making things better. I think if it's going to improve, I'm for it. I don't know if we get the version we saw this past year every year that it has a lot of staying power, at least in the minds of NBA fans who are just going to, flip away to a Thursday night football game or whatever else is going on. But this first edition was not perfect, and it was never going to be perfect. But when you juice it up like they did, it was going to be some fantastic, a cup. It's another trophy. Of course, the Lakers won, so everybody's going to make fun of it on Twitter. But I mean, do the players care? Maybe. I mean, the extra money is nice, but with the salaries now, I mean, it's for 2/3 of the roster. It's I won't say negligible. It's $1 million or whatever it is, but I think they need to add more incentives into it somehow. And I'm not saying playoff seeding or anything like that. That's ridiculous. But something's got to be done tweak wise, not overhaul. I think we've established, the baseline is good enough. Like you mentioned, it's almost into good. It's more into a fair if we had like a middle ground between good and bad. It's certainly not ugly. I was worried about ugly. I thought it was going to be a train wreck, and it wasn't. So I will give credit where it's due. It was better than I expected, but I don't think it's met the expectations of a lot of NBA fans, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do to improve it from a fan standpoint and a player standpoint.
All right, what you got for bad? Let's done being merry after 30 minutes. Let's talk about the bad, which, by the way, less bad and ugly than good. So I think that's a good thing.
Right. I just wrote down coaching carousel. I mean, what are we doing with this stuff? I mean, we're getting towards like college football level of you better win 9 games in 3 months or you're gone. I mean, we mentioned off the top, I think you made a point. Adrian Griffin out 43 games in because Giannis didn't love him. And I get wanting to keep a guy like Giannis in a city like Milwaukee, but I just don't know that. I mean, you hired the most famous playoff choke artist of all time in Doc Rivers to take his place. That's the Band-Aid that's going to fix the problems that have fallen upon them in the postseason following their championship a couple years ago. The fact that Bud's not still there blows my mind. And I get it was not a perfect marriage even after the title, but as far as just the movement we see, Darwin Ham, was he responsible for everything? No. Was he blamed for everything? Yeah. Did they respect him? Absolutely not. And they fired him. And obviously, rent don't buy when you're coaching the Lakers. But, I mean, it's just something's got to change. Monty Williams is getting paid $13 million a year not to coach the Pistons now. They signed him to
that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I mean, that was the
that's
one.
The one.
Like,
that's
right.
Jimbo Fisher. It's awful. They signed him to 6-man money. And they fired him after a year because he won 14 games. I mean, it's $13 million a year. That is so much money.
Fun fact, that's almost a mid-level exception now, by the way.
It's ridiculous. In 10 years, it'll be the minimum, but it's insane.
Fair.
And the fact that it's the Pistons, who I'm going to mention in the segment after this, but I mean, something's got to happen with the coaches to where you can't just scroll on Twitter and be like, oh, yeah, the coach sucks and fire him. Like, I don't understand it. It's not always the coach. There's a very small handful of excellent coaches, and you know who they are because they've been where they are for a long, long time. But I don't think it's, you spin a wheel, pick one out of the TV booth, wherever. I don't, something, it just, I don't think it's sustainable. Because I think about when guys like Popovich and Kerr and Spoelstra move on, we're going to be left with who can get to year 4 the fastest. I don't think it's sustainable. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, they should never be restrictions on firing coaches. I get it. There's situations like with the current Rockets coach where you have to do it very quickly, even if you don't necessarily want to. But it's startling, I'll say, to see, the narratives. And again, social media is not a reflection of reality, but things like First Take now aren't either. But to see the discourse around coaches and like, oh, just fire the coach, that'll fix it. No, the Bucks still lost in the first round. Again, that's with Giannis out. You can contextualize that however you want. I mean, they added Damian Lillard. He's not in a lot of finals either.
So apparently, according to Doc on Bill Simmons' show, he didn't work out the entire offseason because he was getting traded. I believe that too.
It's just I don't know, and that's more of a problem in Milwaukee. But you can't fire Damian Lillard. I get that. You can't fire Anthony Davis. I understand that, but I don't know. I don't love it as a fan. I'm not saying every coach needs to stay for 10 years and get back to the long tenures of the guys, the legends that are on their way out. I'm just worried about when those guys go. What happens, and the Redick hire for your Lakers is what it is. We'll see. It's either going to be great because LeBron's going to coach and he's going to scribble, or it's going to be a disaster. At some point, there's got to be maybe a change in just how we think or how front offices think. I mean, there's not a lot of GMs getting axed before coaches. And I get there's a hierarchy of power and decision-making, all these things, but the coach always being the first one to go, one almost never works. It worked for like 6 weeks in Atlanta a couple of years ago, and then they were right back to where they were. So I don't know. That's not a trend I've enjoyed, and it hit, like you said, the straw that broke the camel's back was you're firing a guy, and you owe him $65 million.
I think there's a bigger, you mentioned the legends and you're referring to the coaches themselves, but I think there's a bigger story that I don't know. I mean, we have the time, but I think there's a bigger conversation around why this is happening that leads into the player empowerment era, where I think the second apron feels like a correction to that a little bit. And I think I have a little bit about the second apron later. Look, the 30-13 thing for me was originally the straw that broke the camel's back. Like you have a NBA Hall of Famer in Giannis. You want to do everything you can, which again he ties into this a little bit as well. But players have that much power. These GMs and these owners work in fear that you almost have to. Somebody has to be the fall guy. It's always been like that in sports. But it was always this thing in the past where when Pat Riley got hired for the Lakers in the 80s, that was a big deal. But it was also the third head coach in a matter of, what was it? It ended up being 3 years or whatever. One of them fell off a bike on his face. The other one was Jerry West, who ultimately didn't want the job and was actually pretty bad at it for a year there. Sorry, I know he passed away, but it was just true for a little bit there. And then Pat Riley took over. I know I'm leaving some of that story out. People can go watch all the 900 documentaries on it. But the point being is there was always these turn of the guard moments where these coaches, the ones that didn't work out, they at least got a chance. And it was really, really weird to see, you mentioned the race to 4 years. I think it even does a disservice where at least this, I'm not saying this is a good thing. This is the bad segment. I'm trying to make sure you follow me here. At least it's this everything sucks carousel. At least it's this spinning carousel of turds. At least it's just spinning in a circle and it all sucks. It even sucks for guys like Charles Lee, Darvin Ham, guys that I think that are incredible. And again, this is no knock to Charles Lee, but Charlotte is one of the only franchises that might not fire him in 3 years. So that's probably a good thing. Kenny Atkinson taking over the Cavs and all kinds of these different situations where some of it just doesn't make any sense, where you're at least these good young coaches that work their way up. The thing that kind of was underrated in this whole thing, I don't know if you remember this happening earlier this year, Kevin Young, probably the most coveted assistant that's not named Charles Lee or Sam Cassell, Phoenix's lead assistant, took a job to go to BYU, which, I mean, look, if he's a familiar NBA head coach and knows how to do that, like the game and how to coach those guys at BYU is probably fine. He's obviously a Mormon. There's a lot more that goes into that decision. But he's willing to take on the sword that is the transfer portal and the way we view college athletics now, from being the next guy, supposedly. We know how this works and how this stuff ages. He was the next phone call for any head coach next year. He just was. He was the first phone call. And he decided to go to BYU. I get, as a Mormon, that's like this like token school. I get it. Like, I'm not discrediting all that. But that was like the first real like eye-opening moment for me, was Kevin Young was willing to like leave the NBA completely and go take a job at BYU, because he probably sees the future of where the head coach position in the NBA is. And if you're not Eric Spoelstra, that gets a million chances or whatever early on in his career, which, again, he was successful. I'm not saying anything he didn't do was good, but he got in at the right time. He got in at a time where those guys got opportunity. And ultimately, all of this, again, it's unfair to everyone involved. Honestly, it's probably why I don't blame Sam Cassell for continuing to be an assistant. Sam probably could have interviewed and has multiple times and probably could have gotten a head coaching job 3 or 4 years ago, but continues to win, right? He was lead assistant in Philly or lead assistant in Milwaukee for a while. He was where was he before? Clippers, I think, and now he's in Boston. He was a winner, and all these places he's been a winner. And now we're like, no one's surprised that he's sticking around, and I don't blame him. I don't blame Damon Stoudemire for taking Georgia Tech. I just don't. So
No, I mean, not a parallel situation. Becky Hammond coaching the Spurs. No, I'll take it to the WNBA. I don't care what the pay cut is or what.
I still can't. I think she knew that Pop wasn't done. I think she knew Pop wasn't done.
That's fair too, but I mean, it's the coaching winning of the San Antonio Spurs is not a bad place to be, and she chose to take it elsewhere. Where she played professionally. I get that, but that's a piece of it too. And I get, right, they've been very, very good, which is no accident. But I mean, you mentioned player empowerment. I didn't even mention his name yet. Bickerstaff got fired in Cleveland. I mean, where are we drawing the line with players that can get coaches fired? Because Donovan Mitchell should not be on that list. I'm sorry. If Donovan Mitchell comes in the office of the GM and says, "Hey, I want the coach fired," it's like, or what? What are you going to do? I mean, he's top 15 player in the NBA, sure, but I don't know.
Monty Williams, you mentioned Monty earlier. Jaden Ivey didn't get him fired, but he should have played Jaden Ivey. He should have played him 100 times more minutes than he did. Who fired Monty Williams? It's a change of the GM guard. I get that. Like that's what it was. But somebody got him fired. There was a reason. It wasn't like he just was bad. He was bad. He was a 2-time coach of the year before that. Like everything told us he was going to probably give him time, 2 to 5 years, like to get these young guys going. Give Cade a team to work with. He's probably going to be. He's probably still the coach right now. And he barely
coached Cade. That was the problem.
Paid.
Yeah. I mean, the most notable date for Cade Cunningham so far is the day he gets shut down. That's just what his career has been so far. It sucks. He's number 1 overall pick. He's very, very talented. He's capable of much more than he's shown in the NBA so far, healthy or not. But, I mean, I think the list of guys that should be able to get coaches fired should begin and end with LeBron James. And the first thing on Spoelstra's Hall of Fame resume should be Coach LeBron James didn't get fired, because that's incredible. Nobody's done it since. I don't think anybody did it before him. So, but if Donovan Mitchell is walking into a front office and getting coaches switched, we've gone too far. I'm sorry. Like I get he's an all-star caliber player, best player on that team. But what are we doing? I don't understand that. It's just that should not be happening. And I get that, Cleveland wants to keep their star, and they've had a, troubled past with keeping stars in town. But he is no LeBron James. He's not even a Kyrie Irving when Kyrie Irving was there. So I don't know why the bar has been lowered from the best player in the world moving around coaching chess pieces to a guy who's starting the all-star game on the bench. I don't know why we've moved that way. And that's to your point about player empowerment and people being held prisoner by their star players. But I think we can do a little better than Donovan Mitchell walking in and handing out pink slips. That opened my eyes too.
All right, I would like to spend, because of time and because of what it is, and you'll laugh, I'd like to spend 5 minutes on this topic, if that. I'm going to read you a Kendra Andrews ESPN report from December 14th, 2023. The Golden State Warriors forward Draymond Green has been suspended again for his on-court behavior, but this time it comes without a time frame for his return. The NBA suspended Green indefinitely on Tuesday, one day after the 4-time champion struck Phoenix Suns center Jusuf Nurkic in the third quarter in the face. of the Warriors' 119-116 loss. He'll be required to meet, quote, certain league and team conditions before he returns to play. The decision to suspend Green comes less than a month. People forget this, which is why we're talking about it. After he was suspended for 5 games for putting Minnesota Timberwolves center Rudy Gobert in a headlock in the November 14th game. So he ended up being suspended 12 games. And the reason I bring this up is because ultimately, is it a bad thing? Yes, that's why it's on this list. Is it something that we should probably be talking about in July? No, probably not. But if history matters in the way we think of a 4-time champion in a Dennis Rodman-like setting, like we think of him in that way, he was the third best player on a... think about it. Okay, look, hear me out for a second. Third best player on a championship dynasty, multiple NBA championships, and defensive menace and rebounder. Like, that's something that he's known for.
Yeah,
obviously, to let me not discredit Rodman in any way, who's one of the best rebounders ever, but Draymond's passing was what Rodman's rebounding was for that team, for Chicago. So they kind of like, that's kind of their comparison or parallel there. My whole point is these are things that we should penalize these guys more. Does that mean he's not a Hall of Famer? No, probably not. But he's had 6 career suspensions. This one ended up being 12 games. He had 5 games before, previously with an altercation with Gobert. I got 5, and then he came back, and then obviously got suspended indefinitely. So this year, ultimately, he got suspended twice. 1 game in April of 23 with the Sabonis altercation. March 2023, he had 16th technical, which a lot of guys have done. November of 2018, so there was a huge gap there. 2023 to 2018 did not have a suspension. It was conduct detrimental to the team. It was a suspension for the KD confrontation. And then June 2016, he had that LeBron altercation that obviously affected the legacy of one of the greatest players of all time and altered what could have been, 5 titles in 6 years. So, or whatever that math ended up being, 4 titles in 5 years or something crazy. So, anyway, my point being is it was bad because it was stupid. It was bad because it's just the way we think of Draymond now. And I think that's honestly why I have it in the bad category, even though in the grand scheme of things, we're going to forget about this in 5 years. We're going to be like, oh, yeah, that thing he did that was stupid. Dennis Rodman-esque at that point was kind of my point there. And he's going to be a Hall of Famer, first ballot, and we're all going to be like, oh, he was this incredible passer, incredible defender, incredible teammate, da-da-da-da. We're all going to just be like, cool, no problem, 5 years later. So, I don't know. I thought it was stupid, and there wasn't a lot of bad, honestly, so it feels like a bit of a stretch.
I think it's bad. I think, one, he's more responsible for the undoing of that dynasty than the doing of the dynasty. I'll say that.
That was on last year's, for what it's worth, and I did send it to you, and that's why we didn't talk about it as much. But I'll pull it up for last year while you're finishing your point. So
I mean, I'll self-report as a bitter Thunder fan who knows good and well he should have been suspended a series prior to the 2016 finals, which would have changed a whole lot in that series too, because it would have changed the finals matchup. But I'm not surprised by it. It's to the point where Steph was weeping out of frustration on the court that his teammate, the guy he's dragged to 4 titles, et cetera, cannot behave above the emotional intelligence of a 6-year-old for 48 minutes a night, a game in which he probably collected a 6-figure paycheck for, because he got his money before Klay Thompson, who was directly responsible for the 4 titles they won, and a reason they just about got a 5th without Draymond. But what Draymond put in motion, and honestly Klay's quote poking fun at LeBron James that set the wheels in motion to that 3-1 comeback, I don't poke bears, especially not LeBron James. Just don't do it. But back to Draymond, I think he's just the epitome of irresponsible. He learned nothing in his 2 weeks of PTO from the NBA or whatever that harsh suspension was. They put the hammer down, and he missed 10% of the season. I don't know, whatever that percentage is. He learned nothing. I don't think anything changed. He went to 3 therapy appointments and learned how to be a responsible human being and get paid millions of dollars to just not get thrown out of games. I mean, that was the bar. Don't get ejected. And he couldn't go a week without it, or punching somebody, choking somebody, stomping on somebody. Just things that aren't acceptable. And I think if he was on any other team but the Warriors, who the league, they kind of have to, they protect him a little bit, try and get the golden years of Golden State in order. If he was on the Raptors, I think he gets suspended longer than Jonte Porter. I don't understand what they're doing to protect him because his teammates don't respect him. His contract is part of the reason Klay Thompson is in Dallas now. And I think if you ask Warriors fans, would you rather have Klay or Draymond? None of them are going to look you in the eye and tell you they would rather have Draymond Green at this point. One, because his decline is happening just as quickly as Klay Thompson's. And at least Klay Thompson's on the court missing shots, not sitting at home collecting paychecks because he can't avoid getting thrown out of games. And Klay Thompson's been a hothead too, but he's not out there trying WWE moves, just daring officials to eject him every night. And he's probably had more text from just arguing with officials for no reason than anybody in the league. I don't know what that, total is technical wise, but it probably exceeds Dennis Rodman. So that's the one stat he's better than him at, I guess. And even as a Thunder fan, it sucks to see the Warriors dynasty, whatever you want to call it, end definitively with him still on the team, overpaid. Klay Thompson's gone. Steph Curry, who knows if he goes on a nostalgia tour to Charlotte, if he's finally sick of Golden State. People in the front office at Golden State were jumping ship. They saw this coming. They saw the Wiggins contract. They saw the Poole contract. Draymond Green forced their hand. They had to trade Jordan Poole because he knocked him out in practice. It's incredible how much it's not really gotten away with because he has been punished, but the leniency he's been shown and the just amount of nothing he's learned from all these incidents you line up in a row. It's hard to find that many incidents across the league in total at the end of the season. So it's just fascinating to me how he gets a pass because, again, he's still riding coattails in Golden State. He's got teammates that are first ballot Hall of Famers, a lot more deservingly so than him, that protect him, put their arm around him and say, hey, it's okay. We're going to go practice acting normal now. And then they suspend him for the 12 games. When I heard indefinite, I thought it was going to be at least a month or two. Like something that actually makes him realize your basketball career is going to be reduced to your podcast if you do this again. And instead it was 12 games, which is probably, I don't know, 2.5 weeks with how the season goes and games line up and et cetera.
You mentioned,
but when I heard it was lifted,
anything, by the way, you not be able to find anything out there in the league of guys getting suspended. This was the note from the article. No other NBA player has received one this season.
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. The bar's so low to stay eligible in the NBA, and he cannot crawl across it time and time again. And it's sad at this point. It was funny for a year, and now it's like we're still doing this. This closer to 40 than 30-year-old is on the court, depriving Steph Curry of meaningful minutes as he exits his first ballot, unanimous, whatever you want to call it, Hall of Fame career, one of the most impactful players the last 15 years of the NBA, revolutionized the three-point shot, whatever you want to call it. And then there's this guy just acting like a child and trying to undo everything Steph accomplished. And there's a lot of reasons why that run didn't keep going, Father Time chief among them. But you can't look back at it and go, what would have happened if Draymond Green was a mentally stable human being? They probably get 5 out of 6, and who knows after that what they do to keep that run going. I mean, we just will never know because Draymond Green undid it as fast as they built it. He undid it. So, yeah, that's bad. That honestly should lead the bad category because, like you said, this season and beyond, those suspensions do not happen because it is so incredibly hard to push the envelope that much to where it happens to you. But he did it, and it barely took him, 2-3 months?
Yeah. I put a bow on him to keep moving to ugly here, or hit whatever your last bad is. Just for context of how people can kind of make their own interpretation of what's bad or ugly. Last year, bad was Robert Sarver, Ime Udoka, and John Morant. I think we would all qualify those as bad things. We could also probably qualify them as ugly for the shape of the league. So again, however I put them. The ugly category was Draymond's punch of Jordan Poole, in the MVP narrative, conversation, and argumentativeness. And then the All-Star game. I just put it was ugly because it was ugly. But I want to read and I'll link it if people read the full thing. I'm going to paraphrase some. I'm going to read the excerpt from the Jordan Poole stuff because I think it puts a lot of context into your endpoint there about how the kind of the what if and things moving forward and how this team kind of collapsed, which obviously led to this year and how Klay left. Again, I'm paraphrasing, leaving some stuff out. If this were a Jeopardy answer, it would sound something like this. Things that can single-handedly derail a defending champion for 1,000. Okay? I think that's pretty clear-cut exactly kind of what the point we were making. But this incident between Draymond Green and Jordan Poole, again paraphrasing here, raised a few interesting questions. How could a team that was so connected less than 5 months prior have such an incident occur among two of its best players? Was it a contract-related conflict as Poole inked his 4-year extension just days after this video surfaced? Why did this video surface when it did? What does this say about Draymond's leadership ability and character? Did this make Bob Myers question his future with the organization? And that brings us to the most important question. Did this derail the Warriors season before it even began? That's for you to decide. And as we know how they made the play-in last year and missed the playoffs altogether. So, all right. Any last, I know we talked about bad, but I know ugly's going to take it some time. So anything else you got on bad real quick?
I mean, it's another kind of weakish one. I'm not really going to get on a soapbox like I just did about this, but night 2 of the NBA draft.
So you have this for bad. I have this for ugly. So you want to lead this?
It's
that's
bad.
all you have left for bad?
Yeah, it was
all
that.
Right, let's start with that then. I have that in ugly. I have 2 ugly things, and we both have the same 2 ugly things. I think pretty much.
Probably.
I added one last minute, like as in like an hour before we started. So I also put the draft in the way it was displayed on television, specifically on the second day. So go ahead. I want to. We both agree on this. It's ugly. It's bad. Whatever. I'm just going to stick it in ugly for the sake of this podcast. But what do you? What's the reason for it being there so strongly?
The whole point they pretended to make with making night 2 its own thing beyond ad space and TV deals, and maybe people will give it the same eyes they did night 1, which is never going to happen. But the 2 guests thing I thought was bad. Just the idea that, we've come a long way from Jokic getting drafted during a Taco Bell ad, but that honestly had more dignity than a lot of what we saw on night 2 of the draft. I don't understand. You separate the 2. I understand that. You can drag out the first round for hours. I didn't really love that. I'm probably going to do what I do with the NFL draft, watch 5 picks, and just check Twitter. But with all the trades that happened, you kind of can't do that, but whatever. It just has got to be a better product if the true reason behind it is to raise awareness for the second-round players. There's a lot of guys in the league, all-stars, all-NBA, what do you want to call it, the best player in the world as we know it right now is a second-round pick. So if you want to make it about the players and not the ad revenue or whatever else you can throw on the TV screen during the broadcast, it has got to be better than what we saw, a week ago? 2 weeks ago? It has got to be better than that. I mean, it was different from the in-season tournament because we really didn't know what to expect. There wasn't a lot of precedent for it, but it was just objectively bad. It reflected poorly on the players. It reflected poorly on the broadcasters who were stuck doing it. I don't really understand what their true vision for it was because I hope it fell short of that. If that went to plan according to the people that put it together, then fire them. It's got to change. It's got to be better. And I'm not some broadcast expert. I don't know how to make it perfect, but I think there is so much room for improvement. I would dare say we are guaranteed a better product next year, but I'm concerned because at that point, slap it in with the first round like we have for all of time and just get it over with. I don't understand.
I went less extreme, whether like bad and ugly, again, interchangeable, really, in a sense. I don't think one's really much worse than the other last year, maybe a little bit with some of the topics in bad. But really, the idea of what it was had nothing to do with Bronny, and we'll get to him in a second. It had nothing to do with him. Like, that's not why they changed the draft. But we really, like, I get he would have watched it with his family. He probably wouldn't have been there anyway. But, like, we missed an incredible opportunity for him to walk up on that stage and shake the, I think it would have been Mark Tatum, right? Shake the second round guy's hand in the middle of that Brooklyn crowd, which I get would have depleted by the 55th pick. But we were robbed of an incredible opportunity to see what that could have sounded and looked like. Really, if you think about it from like a why did they do it? What is the storyline reason? I mean, look, they're not going to, ESPN's just not going to talk about the Kyle Filipowski stuff on TV. They're just not. Like, it just, leave that story alone and is what it is. They're just going to set it aside and let it develop. We still don't really know enough about it. So from a watchability standpoint, like next day, whatever, like I have less of a problem with what happened. I have more of a problem with like what you said about the 2 players or the 2 people with them thing. Takes away from the opportunity there. It doesn't need to be in a studio, for crying out loud. Really the only story, like from just what we watched and the guys in the second, it was really the Kyle Filipowski thing and Ronnie James thing. Those were the 2, like, all right, storylines. My biggest problem was 4:00 in the afternoon on a freaking Thursday. Like, I get the NFL draft as, like, at least they do Friday night afternoon. I think they do Friday afternoon after Thursday, right? Is it afternoon or night?
Yeah.
Is it afternoon? Okay. Well, either way. Like
2 o'clock.
People still watch. I have a problem with that, too, to be honest with you. But I get they have to do 3 rounds in, X amount of hours. This is 30 picks. We could have done this at night the next night. And then in the NFL on Saturday, like it's Saturday, whatever, throw it on Saturday in April. It is what it is. My problem ultimately is I don't know how you make it better because those were clearly changes they put in effect because that was what they thought was going to work the most at the time, and I don't see them making a major change. The only reason I walk some of this back is because Ryan and I talked about it at the end of the, I guess it would have been the last pod that went up, the NBA draft show, Ryan, and he made a really great point, and I haven't talked to a ton of people about this. I need to, but the people that work in it, the scouts, the agents, the players, the coaches, the people in the front office, the people that make the decisions that are in and around the draft, that live it and breathe it, they got a break. They got a chance to actually be strategic. And, like, I think it's an incredible way to think about it because, like, the NFL, you know, you have guys that slip to the second round and end up being incredible picks. Like, we get it. We see that all the time, every draft, really. But ultimately, my whole point is the NFL, like, draft, even, like, at home, I'm not even involved in it. I'm a fan. I'm watching it. I'm exhausted by the end of the first round. So I like the way that they segment it. And I think the NBA has a good idea with it. But this year especially, there's not like the same storyline draw from the average fan just isn't there with the second round. And I honestly think they did themselves a disservice having Bronny at, you know, albeit by the time it happened, it was 6:30 at night. But, you know, having him in the second round, at the end of the round, and like they obviously were going to make a big deal of it regardless, but to have that be like this thing that was pushed into like the next night, I don't think it was executed well, but I do agree with the 2-day thing. I think it's totally fine. I have no problem with it. It's just the way it was executed.
Yeah, I mean, I get the Bronny thing is a unique case for, you know, attempt one at this, and that may be what the issue was when we all look back on it. There's going to be tweaks to any broadcast, especially something as important as the NBA draft. And I get the point about, you know, having that break in the draft process and everybody involved, the ones that are pulling all-nighters appreciate it, and I have no problem with that. But it's just it's the implementation more than the idea that I took issue with. I don't think that's an uncommon opinion. So hopefully that level of feedback, all pull in the same direction of you got to change something, will produce change. But, you know, that's technically looking towards next season, but it's one of the final things that we see before the true lull in the offseason before October. That was not the best note to leave the NBA on.
No, I think it's totally fair, and I don't really have anything else to add to it because, again, having that conversation with Ryan, people can go check that out last week, it helped me think some of this through a little bit better, where I've always wanted the second round. I've made that point for years. It's just the way it was executed. Again, we all agree it was executed very terribly, and ESPN is to blame for a lot of that. All right. Let's just do it now because you and I have not had a Bronny James conversation in front of a microphone that is live. I only went with ugly for one reason and one reason only. It's that there were too many people, and this could go for really any conversation, but there were too many people that were too, I don't want to call them selfish, but just too strong in one direction that it honestly reminded me too much of politics.
Honestly, yeah.
That's really where I landed on it. Reminded me too much of politics, and I think when we have that in basketball specifically, like there's the joke and the meme, if I can remember to put it in, I'll put it on the screen. But like, you know, the NBA and its Cookie Monster, you know,
right, exactly,
smoking out of the cookie or whatever, I'll put it on the screen. I don't want to describe it too much, but the NBA is always going to be like, I think I made this point in November. I don't remember what it was for, but the NBA is just, it's Real Housewives until basically May. Like, just, it is. Like, the NBA is a Real Housewives show for sports fans. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. But I think when you interject such a negativity into the conversation, specifically about, take all the factors out of it aside. Like, I made the comparison to the point, I think you said you listen to all the shows, and I appreciate it. You probably heard it. It's the equivalent of Brady throwing a touchdown in the Super Bowl to his son. Like, this is where we are with this. Like, people have to understand that. Like, I know King Griffey Jr. and Griffey Griffey Sr. was a big deal. Doesn't compare. Like, what happened and what the thought of what this is from a sports perspective is an incredible thing. We'll probably never see it again at this level, right? I made the point of, like, with Ryan, top 15 player in the NBA. As simple cut as it is, he is. He won the award last year. Top 15 player in the NBA. Playing with his son. Playing on the same team, that is an incredible thing. But the extreme that it got to because of nepotism, because of all this stuff that's in the NBA every day, it's in the chasms of basketball and the youth development system, all the way from there in AAU all the way up to the NBA. It just is what it is. I made the comparison to like any business. If your dad is a high businessman in that business, you're probably going to get a decent job better than the guy next to you. It just is what it is. I'm sorry. And I think just the negativity in the comparison to politics was what bothered me the most.
I've just never seen such a powerful unity behind people that, one, just pretend to care about the NBA now because they've written it off, they boycott it, whatever. And then now they're the biggest defender of the integrity of the second round of the NBA draft. I mean, the same round of the draft that entails picks being bought for $1 million, which is the equivalent of an NBA team dropping a dime on the ground. Teams forfeit second round picks every year for tampering. You know what happens the next year?
2 of them this
They
year.
do it again because they don't care. No
right.
one cares. They don't care.
It's 100%.
And he was the 50. If they had done this at 17, yeah, it's absurd.
With Konechka on the board, by the way.
Right. I don't care who anybody on the board.
This studio might I might have committed arson. Like I just would have.
You can't do it. You can't do that. I would have, those people would have a leg to stand on if he went 17th overall in the NBA draft, because he wasn't a top 20 prospect and he wasn't a top 60 prospect. Was he top 100? I don't know. I didn't do 100 dude big board. Probably. You have to also keep in mind,
but yeah, to your point.
Yeah, you have to keep in mind, one, the fact that this kid is up walking, playing basketball is a miracle. He had the heart issue a year ago, and everybody wants to gloss over that. It's like, well, you're going to draft him because he had a heart attack. No, it's all the more reason to celebrate the fact that he's even playing Division I college basketball in a major conference before it died, unfortunately. But I think that that gets lost in it a lot. And the main theme of the people that hate Bronny James is they also hate LeBron James. And the only main theme with hating LeBron James is a lot of it has nothing to do with what he does in the basketball court, which gets to your point about being too much politics. It's just stupid. You're not appreciating, one, the fact that LeBron James is playing at an all-NBA level at 39, soon to be 40 years old. And two, he stuck it out long enough to where his son is even eligible to be drafted whatsoever. Like, that's insane. I mean, just today you talked about the baseball and the Griffeys, and I get that. Manny Ramirez and David Ortiz's sons got drafted today. They have not played baseball in half a decade plus.
Genuinely didn't know that.
Because it was in like the 20th round. And if they, that again, nepotism is everywhere. I don't get those tweets to my timeline of Manny Ramirez's son going to my Angels if it's Manny Smith. No one cares. I couldn't tell you the 3 guys we drafted before him or the 20 guys we drafted after him. I have no idea. I don't know. I might not know for months. Or ever. But to act like LeBron James, exactly. To act like LeBron James invented nepotism is stupid. And to act like Bronny James was, a 6th option at the YMCA and he just got dragged to the league. No. Was he ready at the NBA? Probably not. To Jaylen Brown's point, whether he meant to make it or not, is he going to go to the G League? Probably not. Would they sell a lot of tickets? Yeah, but LeBron wants him alongside him on the bench, and they will have a time set up at a home game, I have no doubt, where he comes in to a contest out of reach one way or the other, probably in a win, I would assume, for optics. And, the Thunder already beat him when he broke the big record. So, not sorry about that. But, you want to win for the next big milestone in LeBron's career. I get that. It's just stupid. I think it's incredible. The fact that Bronny James, like I said, is healthy enough to continue playing the game he loves. I don't know if he's going to duck the Call of Duty stuff that Kyler Murray deals with, but I think it's incredible. I cannot wait to watch them in the same building, wearing the same uniform. I don't care when they play, who he checks in against, how bad his summer league stats. The best summer league player of all time is Ben Simmons. That is how much the summer league means. I don't care how good you are in the summer league, how bad you are in the summer league. It means nothing. It doesn't dictate anything. But the negative people on the side of this, which are the loudest ones, unfortunately, have reveled in the fact that he's airballing threes and all this stuff. And it's just like, who cares? No highlight pack of any player ever has had a second of summer league in it. And I'm a Thunder fan. That's all we do is win the summer league. It doesn't happen. They get the NBA. They find their footing. They find a role with a team. Hopefully it's his first team because it's his dad's team. And that's just what it's going to be. You knew he was going to get drafted. You knew they had the 55th pick. That, again, you can't name me a 55th pick in the draft. No one cares. The only time anybody cared is when they were comparing contracts and complaining about that, which is also stupid. I've never seen an uproar over the second round of the NBA draft ever. And to act like Bronny James is some sin against the NBA and, all it stands for is just stupid. I don't get it. There's no reason to be angry about it. You can hate LeBron James. That's fine. I don't care. Just be quiet about it and let people like me and you enjoy it in peace, because I'm tired of seeing it coming out of people's mouths on Twitter. I'm tired of seeing Kendrick Perkins complain about it. I'm tired of seeing just in general. There's just so much negativity and it's largely baseless, and I'm just tired of it.
It just gives people another reason to hate LeBron. And I get
oh, for sure.
It's one of those things where the goalpost always moves. The old saying, you're gonna move the goalpost for your opinion and your players. It is what it is. But it just gives people another reason to look back on a career and people. I've had this debate and argument with people like Desmond Johnson on Out of Pocket with Michael Davis. I was like, look, people are going to look at LeBron's last few years so poorly, and I'm going to be like, guys, can we just not remember the fact that the Wizards and Jordan, that whole thing happened? LeBron's doing what he's doing at 40, making all NBA teams. Let's just be real for a second. And they're not on the same playing field at that point when you compare the two. And to add to your resume that in any way, however it happened, that you played with your son when you were a top 15 player in the NBA, because until that changes, until he doesn't win it next year or the year after or the year after that, I'm going off the season. We're here recapping the 2023-24 NBA season. That's the whole point of this show, and the whole point of this conversation is that he was a top 15 player. His son's going to play with him next year. Until that crown goes away, no pun intended, it shouldn't be demoted in any way, regardless.
So that might be the truly unbreakable record he leaves behind in the league. I mean, the scoring title is up there, but they'll have a 4-pointer soon, I'm sure. So who knows when that's going to get chased down. But I truly do not think
beyond the bad or ugly of that season, it will be.
That would be something worse than ugly. I would pop a blood vessel probably. But I think that this is one of those things where his career is going to have a lot of things that are never going to happen again. And this is going to be one that may not happen in sports. Forget what level professional sports, having a career of 20 plus years and having your son who was shorter than your kneecap when you came into the league. Even in Cleveland, it was just early on. It's incredible. Those pictures from then to now is just insane. And I hope they draft Bryce number 1 overall. I don't care. Make him even more mad. I think it's ridiculous. If that were to line up in 2 years, I believe when he's eligible, I'm all for it. I do realize there's 13 to 15 spots for an NBA team, and if 3 of them are from the James family, that might not be doable, even with all his influence. He may be the head coach officially by then. Who knows? But I would love for it to line up with Bryce, make him even more mad, make him more miserable. These people wake up from 6 hours on Twitter at night to go to 9 to 5s and be miserable there. So I'll never understand it. I hate that I even have to interact with it on any level on social media, but the negative stuff gets pushed to the top, unfortunately, a lot of times. So I'm grateful to be able to watch it next season. I look very much looking forward to it.
I'm scrapping my last one because we're at the 115 mark, and it really is not going to be better to end it on a way that is the lovely conversation about Bronny James. And I'm with you. I hope he plays well, and I hope for, in some weird, sick, twisted fate way, I hope there's a good ending to this. And history tells us in 99% of things, history and sports, that things don't end well. They just don't. And so,
right, yeah. You mentioned that last time, too. Yeah.
Really somber way to put that. But it's the ugly part of the podcast, and that's how we're going to close. So anything else that you have that we can hit really fast on the way out?
How about we have one expansion team? We just take the Pistons away from whoever's in charge.
I forgot you.
I know.
All right, yeah, let's have 5 minutes.
I know they just did the whole thing. Detroit deserves a basketball team for as long as they want a basketball team. The people in charge of it now, I know they all just got fired for the 4th time in 5 years or whatever. It's a fresh start, reboot, whatever. Maybe the coach will realize Jaden Ivey is an actual playable person on the team and not like the water boy. It's so sad to see a team like that with the history they have. And I mean, 2004 seems like eons ago when you watch them now lose 28 games in a row.
It's 20 years ago. As crazy as that sounds right now.
Well, I mean, speaking of 20, they've won more than 20 games once in the last 3 years. That's pathetic.
You
It's
literally, like, you don't have to say another thing. You said it already 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Boston lost less games than the Pistons won this
yes,
season. That should be how we should just.
yeah.
I should just play the outro now. Like that's the
The
summary
most
of the season.
watched NBA regular season game was when Detroit took Boston to overtime because one, that is the most Boston Celtics loss ever, like 26 games into the 28 game losing streak. And two, we're all like, we have to watch them lose one more time, right? And everybody did. And of course, they lost by like 15 in overtime, which is a 5 minute period somehow. But it's they need like a seance. I don't know if Kyrie Irving needs to go around with Sage, even though he's acting normal now. So maybe don't risk that.
As we were recording, he just got surgery on a broken wrist, so that couldn't have been timed any better on your part. But did you even know that?
I didn't, but I hope
Okay.
anesthesia does not revert him back to whatever nonsense he's been doing the
Literally,
last 3
it
years.
happened 25 minutes ago.
Well, I hope he recovers. He comes back. I think
Me
that's
too,
a
but
hell of a
good
Dallas
grief!
thing.
Like, I mean, like, come on, the conversation.
That's on the ugly
it's
list.
So good, and then
Keep Kyrie Irving normal.
Yeah, fair.
I give him respect for playing through whatever that was. I'll tell you what, because I would have had no idea. It's just, and it's kind of a lazy take because they've been the worst team in the NBA for years, and before they were winning 17 and 14 games, they're winning 20 games in the shortened COVID seasons. Not like they would have won a lot of those extra games anyway. But it's sad to see a city that has seen such heights with the franchise just see such lows. I mean, I know the other teams in the city aren't really carrying a lot of the load as far as making sports fans not depressed in Detroit.
I don't
The
know.
Lions are working on it.
I was gonna say, did the Pistons die so that the Lions could run? Like, I don't. That's not really.
I watched the second half of that Niners game the same way you did. I don't think they're quite there yet. But I think that I'm glad they're not paying a head coach more than $13 million a year is the fifth highest paid player on the Pistons next year. And that's after they paid the terrible tax for Tobias Harris to come back and they absorbed Hardaway Jr. So that needed to change. I know they still have to pay it. It's not a cap hit, thank God. But there's just got to be better people in charge. I want Detroit to be good again. I don't mean winning 60 games. I mean winning 30 because that would be a high for a long time.
If they win 15 games, it's one of the biggest turnarounds in the last 20 years.
There's just so many guys that have talent on that team, right? There's so many, which would double their win total, which is absurd.
That's what's crazy.
Yeah.
Like, if they finish 12th in the Eastern Conference, it's the biggest turnaround in 15 years.
If they're mathematically eligible for the play-in at any point with a month to go, I think that's coach of the year. I don't care what else is done across the NBA. Daigneault will win 6 more after next year. Give it to it needs to be awarded that way. And it's just you could look at so many things with that team, and they've lost literally a third of the schedule consecutively. That's insane. And, there's a larger point about tanking I won't get to. It's not going to stop because, again, no one cares about second-round picks. They'll forfeit it for tanking. We saw Dallas duck the play-in 2 years ago. And unfortunately, they were rewarded for that. They ended up with Lively. But
that's the thing. Hold on. You just made an incredible point I don't think you even thought about. Detroit's not even, like, getting rewarded for this.
They pick fifth every year. It's like clockwork.
This is what the NBA wanted, though, when they changed the tanking rules.
When they flattened it, this is what they wanted.
They wanted teams to be at this weird impasse in the top 5. And Detroit's like, give me a break. Teams just, like, Detroit, literally, like, there was NBA draft analysts that were connected to Detroit this year saying that, like, they just didn't even know what to do with the pick anymore.
This draft especially, but I mean,
but the
you
fact
just go through who they could have.
Year.
Yeah, because it was like, however deep the draft is, the Pistons pick next every single year. I don't know how it happens mathematically. I know 14% is not a lot to duck around, but it's truly sad. There's a Pistons fan I got to know this past year, a coworker that was like, just put us fifth every year, get it over with. I don't even want to see the lottery. Just put us fifth and put lottery balls for everybody else. Just don't even put us through the pain of wondering if we will ever not lose value in our draft pick because of ping pong balls. So that hasn't helped the half decade of just atrocities. But at some point,
Yep.
hopefully, these people they keep bringing in to run the team will do right by them, do right by the city, and we'll have some semblance of a respectable basketball team there. But that is a very long tunnel with a very faint light at the end of it at this point.
I think it's a great way to close. First of all, thank you for allowing, just to give me, I asked for an hour, give or take, and we go longer, obviously. Thanks for allowing time for me and anybody else in your social or life in general right now while college football was released yesterday. So thanks for that. I know I'm taking an hour away from building a dynasty right now. So I appreciate people's support. That the numbers will probably reflect what people are doing right now in this show anyway. But I don't have anything else for you basketball related, so I'll just really quick before you plug, I want people to know that they're going to get what they're going to get podcast wise here as best I can the next couple of weeks. Trivia showdowns are already recorded, locked, loaded, ready to go. They'll come out whenever they're ready to come out, whenever I go into a hole and do college basketball for 3-4 weeks in a row for the magazine. Magazine's coming this year. Can't really talk about it yet. Had some conversation with coaches this week about magazine and their teams and stuff. So things are really getting working in that direction. We're super excited. You'll get a couple of off different things schedule wise here. You'll get a couple of interviews I've got scheduled and lined up. But once you see Trivia Showdown, just know I'm off the face of the planet because I'm deep diving the 13th best team in the CAA this year. So I'm just going to put that out there, and I'll put it out there a couple more times before it actually happens. So on the way out, plug away. And anything you guys are coming, I know you look. Once baseball's over, I know you guys got the MLB. Like I get it. Like I say, baseball isn't like college baseball for Clemson and all that, but I mean, look, it's the dog days for everybody, even the baseball podcasters. So tell me about what's going on and what we soon, rather than later, football-wise, what are we getting?
Yeah, so I'm on the John Rothstein sleep schedule right now. I don't sleep. I'm gonna, the rest of this week is gonna be sat in front of my TV. So if anything, this is technically still screen time, but that's going to be shot across my devices, unfortunately. But that's the college football we have. It's been a decade. It's been a long time coming, and the game's very, very good. So that will be on the good list for me as far as football. But like he alluded to, I've got a podcast with a couple of my college roommates. We all work Clemson Sports Medicine together. It's the 1009 on Twitter, Apple, Spotify. We just went through a month-long hiatus because we talk baseball every day, and we're also bored of it. So we'll do a little home run derby recap, all-star game, everything in between. Just because week to week.
You better lead with the thing that happened before the home run derby even happened.
That was, we'll be in the same. Yeah.
You saw what happened, right, to her? She turned
I did.
She hammered and with rehab.
Well,
so.
Yeah.
Tough looks.
We will try to be in a better state than that when we record. But Bailey's bachelor party is this weekend. So if we don't get it out now, we're going to need next week to recover probably. So look out for that later this week before all that nonsense starts. So like I said, Apple and Spotify at the 1009 as Trevor's background falls apart. That's about all I got. Enjoyed every time I come on here. New format for me. Enjoyed it a lot. Took a lot of notes, used a lot of notes. I didn't have a Draymond rant prepared because I kind of forgot he did all that mess. So that was off the dome. Any chance to put him down as an athlete, I will take as a Thunder fan. So I appreciate that. And looking forward to the trivia showdowns through the summer.
Yeah, like Grayson said, the trivia showdown will be coming soon. Don't forget, you can use the code 2pointers for $20 off your first purchase. SeatGeek.com, link in the top of the description for that. All of Grayson's stuff will be linked below as well. Don't forget to check out all the stuff they've got coming. Even if you don't care about baseball, whatever, go drop them a sub, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Do like you guys have been doing around here, doing the same thing. Like, comment, subscribe, 5-star rating and a review on podcast platforms is always appreciated. Be on the lookout for anything from me on Twitter. You'll see it below at Trevor Everett or at 2pointers. We'll be keeping you updated on the off season. But we got the Olympics. There's going to be some Olympic pods. I forgot to mention that. Obviously, you and I are probably going to be the only 4 people I know that actually watch it in its extent. So probably won't be your last appearance this summer. So thank you for actually watching basketball and caring about it. But the Olympics is coming, super fun. Obviously, U.S. is probably going to do really well. We'll talk about that if they do or they don't. So without further ado, this has been the 2 Pointers Podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and we'll see you the next time we see you.